And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our guest author and friend, Janet Morana. Her book, Everything You Need to Know About Abortion for Teens, published by TAN, available naturally through our EWTN religious catalog, EWTNRC.com for all things Catholic. And it's great to see you again.
Great
Janet.
to be here, Doug.
Been on many programs over the years on the network, and certainly a big pro-life warrior. In this book, Everything You Need to Know About Abortion, but it's for teens. Why for teens?
Well, basically, because the main reason is that they are targeted by Planned Parenthood, as you probably know. They're in the school system, in the public schools. They're on college campuses. So our young people are targeted by the abortion industry. And TAN, who published my first book, Recall Abortion, approached me and said, you know, Janet, we really loved Recall Abortion. It was a bestseller, but can you take that and refashion it just a little bit and add more current things to it and talk to kids? So I always say it's for teens, but adults too, because I think you've read it. Adults can, there's a lot of facts in here that they need to know too. But I spoke to kids, you know, kind of said to them, well, if you don't believe me, ask your father. And, oh, here, this is how this went. And then, of course, I included a whole chapter on chastity, which I thought was very important. And then finally, near the end of the book, I introduced them to the pro-life movement. I break down all the different groups in the movement, showing them the major groups and their websites and what they do, because my hope is this becomes then a study guide for them to go forward and find their place to help bring an end to abortion.
Well, what do you say to people who say, but I thought Roe v. Wade was overturned and Doe versus Bowl, well, that's all passé now. And so what are we talking about now?
Well, basically all that did was it took it out of the court system and put it back in the legislative branches of our government. So it's in the states, yes, but it's also at the federal level. So first of all, we have the states, and we all know that there's been at least 7 or 8, and it keeps increasing, number of states who have now enshrined it in their constitution, abortion till birth, and so forth. And then there's other states, about 13 at this taping.
Are you surprised that that's been the reaction?
I'm not surprised because, you know, there's not an abortion the abortion industry doesn't like. They keep muddling up with reproductive health and medical abortion and all these nice soft terms. But in fact, it's the killing of an unborn child, which I really spell out in the book for the kids. But also, too, what it does to the woman, what it does to the mom, the dad, the grandparents, the future siblings. The whole family unit is impacted, but also to society at large. I mean, look at all, we have over 65 million children lost because of Roe v. Wade, and that's just the ones we can kind of count and keep track of, and I'm sure there's many more than that. And it's still happening. And so we've got to show people, my goal by writing this book is to make abortion unthinkable. You know, kind of like when you think back tobacco, when we were growing up, right? Smoking was cool, everyone did it, it was all over the place, even smoked on planes. But then how long did it take for the Surgeon General to give the stamp on the packages and the Cancer Society to really try to change things? Do people still smoke? Yeah, but it's kind of very unacceptable and taboo right now, right? Most places you can't smoke. And so people have woken up about smoking. So we've got to do that with abortion. We've got to get to the point where it's a product we don't want to buy,
well,
we don't want to have.
It's interesting, you said you want to make it unthinkable. Part of the problem seems to be is that people don't want to think about it at all.
Well, that's true in a way, but since Roe v. Wade, as you know, it's opened up a can of worms. Kind of, we've always, you know, said pro-life people all these years, let's get it off the back burner, put it on the front burner. Well, because of that leaked document, the Alito document, now it's out and everyone is talking about it. So I think what we have to do is have honest conversations. Instead of couching it in soft words like reproductive rights, let's talk about what an abortion is. Let's challenge people to say, well, have you seen what an abortion is? You know, there's diagrams out there you can see of first, second, and late-term abortion. There's all the testimonies of the women who've had abortions, as you know, that I work with.
With Silent No More.
Silent No More, Rachel's Vineyard. I mean, these are the people who bought the lie or were even pressured and forced to have an abortion and found out it didn't solve their problems, it created all the problems. So I think we have to keep the discussion going, but an honest discussion. And I always want to say, these politicians and people that support abortion say, well, have you ever seen what an abortion does to an unborn child? Challenge them to look at...
And that's why you have basically a gallery of photos.
Yes.
In the book, in color.
Yes, and these are not pictures, by the way, Doug, of abortion. They
Right.
can go to websites for that, which I direct them to.
Right.
But they're beautiful pictures of the unborn child.
Right.
And what I did was I deliberately took pictures starting at 7 weeks, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks, because those are the very weeks that they are killing these babies by the chemical abortion, the RU486. And as you know now, it's over the counter. It's going.
Right. You can get it
I mean,
at a
it's going to
pharmacy
be
with the right prescription.
exactly.
Right.
And I want these young people to see what that baby looks like.
Right.
And the baby is talking to them in the pictures where they're saying, look at me, my heart has already been beating millions of times.
Right.
Look what I can do. I can move, flex my arms and my legs and my muscles are growing. I want them to identify with this unborn child. And for the reason that maybe they would never have an abortion, but they could save a life. They could stop a friend or a classmate from having an abortion. And that's what I want to do. Empower them with the tools they can to save children's lives.
Now, you, Mary Kaminsky from the St. John Henry Newman Catholic Center did the forward, and she makes the point, did you know that 1/3 of your generation, meaning for teens, is missing because of abortions?
Right.
And you say in this book you'll learn about the history and deep, dark secrets of the abortion industry and why many of those involved in promoting it have since changed their minds. Did you pick her to write the
Yes, I did.
write the forward, and
Yes,
why?
I did. Well, I've known Mary for decades. She had her abortion actually as a teenager. She lived in New Jersey, and Planned Parenthood in New Jersey sent her across state lines into New York because at that time
Right.
abortion was illegal in New Jersey. So she went with her boyfriend to New York, and she actually had her abortion in Dr. Nathanson's clinic.
Oh, really?
Yes, she did. Not he didn't actually perform
Do
her
it,
abortion,
right.
but it was the clinic that he owned, and he did do abortions
Right.
there. And of course, you know, she went through years and years of regret and trauma, and eventually came to healing and through Rachel's Vineyard,
Right.
and then speaks very vocally with Silent No More. And of course, she's our co-host on the Catholic View for Women. So Mary and I go way back. But she also speaks a lot on college campuses, and she knows the heart of the young people because that's her work. And so I picked her to write the forward because I know she knows how to talk to our youth.
Right.
You know?
She makes the point, after an abortion, the body remembers because the womb is the heart of the woman.
Right.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, that's so true. I mean, you know, women, we are nurturers. God made us that way to give life, create life. And so, you know, what the abortion does, it disrupts what's our very nature, you know, to be a giving mom and everything. So, and Mary knows that quite well because of her experience. You know?
Now, you talk about My Way or God's Way, and initially when you talk about your own life and when
Right.
you were a school teacher in New York City. Were you in Brooklyn and Manhattan? Where were you? You grew up in Brooklyn,
I grew
right?
up in Brooklyn, but I
Right.
taught public school in Staten Island.
Oh, it's Staten
Yeah,
Island. Okay. And you had a good friend named Denise, or at least that's the name you use here,
Right.
who again was the classic case of being pro-choice. Well, you were kind of the oddball, right?
Yes, I was the oddball.
No, I remember in those days people would think, well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well,
I'm personally opposed was
Yeah.
a typical thing for
Yeah,
people to
in my
say.
school, I was there was only maybe 2 or 3 of the teachers out of 40 that were pro-life, and it was odd though with my friend there. I remember when they had the whole partial birth abortion
Right.
discussion, and there was a thing where you could sign a postcard to say I'm against that, and I had showed it. You know, we were talking in the teachers' lunchroom, and I showed it to my friend, and she said, "Oh, well, I'm not in favor of that." I said, "Well, that's abortion." She goes, "Oh, well, I guess I'm not as pro-choice as I thought." So it got to move her the needle down a little bit more to say, "Oh, well, that's going too far." And that's why I think the discussions on what an abortion does to an unborn child is so important, because we can move people down the road.
I thought it was interesting too. You talk about the experience with the chickens.
Oh, the chicken, yes.
The chicken and kind of that reaction, and then you go to expand that out to people who are pro-aborts or very
Right.
pro-choice in the sense of, but seem to, and you talk about what if it was a litter of dogs,
Puppies,
of
right.
puppies or
Yeah.
whatever. The reaction is totally different.
That's right. Well, the story about the chicken was we were first grade teachers. We were raising these little chicks in eggs in the incubator and would come in every day to check them. And so this morning, it was premature. The one chick, the shell cracked open, and you could see the heartbeat pulsing, and you knew the chick was going to die.
Right.
And she was horrified. horrified. And then she said, "Oh, is there something we can do?" I said, "I'm sorry, Debbie, but unfortunately, it's premature."
Right.
And I said, "That's what happens with unborn children." And she just paused and went, "I never thought about that." It got her to rethink. Now, the example I give the kids about puppies is I take two examples. Suppose you have a dog, a thoroughbred, pregnant with 4 or 5 puppies, and now there's a mutt dog, mixed breed, and also pregnant. Well, the one with the thoroughbred, they're going to sell those puppies, to people and make a lot of money. But with this other one, they're going to have a hard time finding homes. So wouldn't it better just to terminate those puppies now? After all, we have so many dogs that don't have homes out there. Right. Everybody will be outraged. Right. And when you say that to kids, they just pause and they look and they go, "Oh, okay. So we won't abort puppies, but we'll abort children, people." Mm. And so I think sometimes when you make these examples to young people and adults too, they can see how ridiculous our thinking is sometimes.
Right. So did you stop being a doubting Thomasina when you went to Epcot? Was that the beginning of it or what?
Well, that's the story where Epcot used to have a display about when life began years ago, a number of years ago.
Yeah, I wonder where that went, right?
Yeah. But it was in the front part by this fountain, and it was the first time I really saw pictures of fetal development like that. And when I came out, it just reminded me the fact that I had taken the birth control pill, when I was married, and it just like flooded over me like, oh my gosh. Did I abort God's will? Did I abort life? Mm-hmm. And so it became a real awakening for me to kind of go back and through spiritual direction and delve into my role in taking contraceptives and everything. Right. By that point I had gone away from all that. I had to come back to the church, but I never really dug deeper into those years of taking the pill. What did that do to me? Morally and my soul and all that. So I had to go back and do some more spiritual direction and deal with it. But it was well worth the experience, I think.
So were you a fan of Maud's or not?
A fan of what?
Maud, when she was on TV in 1972. You bring up Maud.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also too, the subject of abortion came up in the Maud back then. Right. And, again, see, when abortion happened in 1973, I was in college, and the Vietnam War was the big thing. Right. I wasn't even aware of Roe v. Wade. I know that sounds crazy, but it wasn't. My friends, we were watching our friends being drafted and going off. Right. And so that was the cause that got my attention. And I didn't find out till years later about abortion. It took a long time, really. And when I did, and came to realize with the pro-life people on Staten Island that I worked with, I was like, you're kidding. People are really having an abortion. I'll never forget one time standing out praying with others in front of an abortion mill in Long Island and seeing visible...
That wasn't Bill Baird's clinic, was it?
No, it wasn't. But it was another clinic in Levittown. But seeing women with
right on
visible...
Hempstead Turnpike, I know where that is.
You know where it is.
Yeah.
But seeing people with visible baby bumps going in to abort children, for me, was a shocker. Right. And I think an iron door closed behind me that said, I have to do something to help women. Right. I have to stop this. This is wrong. And so, phrases like abortion harms women, abortion hurts women, I was using those phrases in my pro-life work all the way back in the early 90s. So I guess when you say, like, how did you come about Silent No More and all this other stuff, it started all the way back then when I said, this is not right for women. It's wrong. And the more I learned, the more, what should I say, involved I got, that I said, that's it. And I got to a point in the year 2000 where I was working in pro-life work as a volunteer, and I was also teaching public school. But I came to a crossroads, and that's when that iron door went behind me, and I said, no, that's it. I want to spend my entire life doing something to bring an end to abortion.
So you saw it as a calling then? Right?
Yes, I did. Okay. I did. And I have ever since. It's been 30, more than 30 years, Doug, and here I still am. But
from illegal to legal abortion, in that chapter you say, abortion through all 9 months is available only in a handful of countries, including the United States, Canada, China, North Korea, Vietnam, Singapore, and the Netherlands. Right. In much of Europe, abortion is only legal until 12 weeks. That was one of the things that I think a lot of people, when at least the Roe v. Wade thing was overturned, were unaware of.
Right.
I think a lot of people were thinking, gee, you know, we're troglodytes here. The very progressive Europeans are way ahead of us. But
Yeah.
when it came to abortion, we really were ahead of a lot of people.
We're ahead, and we're in line with all those communist countries you just named. I mean, most of Europe is only up to 12 weeks. And so, you know, we are at fault, really, in America of exporting abortion all over the world. We really are.
And a lot of other things.
And a lot of other things, too. Yeah, with contraception, as you know, and all that. It's one big package, you know, that goes worldwide. And so I just want people to be aware of how radical our position here is in the United States.
Right, right. Even though it gets portrayed as if it's not. Now, you knew Nathanson.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Who was Bernard Nathanson?
Well, Bernard Nathanson was a man who went on a journey, you know. Everyone knows the story about how he even aborted his own child. He says he was responsible for 60,000 abortions from his clinic alone. And of course, he said we built this whole industry on lies. He fully admits that. Right. And he also said...
That's how the devil always works, right?
Exactly. And he also said that they counted on the church's silence to get away with what they did. And one of the quotes, and I think I quoted in the book, was he said that they would never have gotten away what they did if the church had been united, purposeful, and strong. Right. And so he was counting on that he got the church sleeping and pushed that whole abortion agenda on us. But then, you know, he did have a conversion with the advent of ultrasound. You know, he actually saw that baby moving away from the instruments. The silent scream. And that began his awakening. So he converted first because looking at abortion for the first time, really. Because before that, it was a blind procedure they were doing with the forceps and everything. So now he got to see, oh my gosh, I'm really killing that baby. He made that connection. And from there, you know, because he was Jewish and almost like no faith at all, so he gradually, you know, became pro-life. And he saw the love of the pro-life movement. And that, I think, deeply affected him. And I was at a conference, it was back in 1994. It was the HLI conference in Irvine, California. And he was supposed to give a workshop on RU486. And he gets to the microphone and he says, I'm not covering this topic today. And we were all just like shocked, like what? And he said, no, I have to tell you what's been burning in my heart. I'm on the brink of conversion, of accepting Christ in my life. Well, Alice von Hildebrand was in the room with me, and the whole place leapt up in joy. And she was like, you know how tiny she is. She was like in the air, and she yelled out, "And we'll pray for you now, doctor." And the whole room burst out in prayer for him. So he was started on that journey in '94, and then, as you know, he eventually became Catholic, and Cardinal O'Connor baptized him, and Joan Andrews Bell was the godmother, and so it was some journey that he came full circle, and that's why I you
can never give up hope.
You never give up hope, and that's why I have hope for Nancy Pelosi, for Biden, for the whole abortion industry. I've met doctors, abortion doctors, who have come out of the industry, you know, who've dropped their instruments and say, I can't do this any longer. And so for me, we're not against them. We're for them.
Is that why they're making it so nurses can do it and trying to figure out ways around?
Well, because they are. They're running out of doctors who are willing to do abortion. I mean, you tell me, Doug, what man or woman goes to medical school and says, I want to be an abortionist? Not really. You know, it's usually the lower rung of the medical profession, and they have made it sound that you don't even have to be an OBGYN or a regular MD to do an abortion, like you just said anymore. In California, doulas can do them, nurse practitioners can do them, and they're going to just keep watering it down. And I don't know. I would not want any of those kind of people doing a surgical procedure on a woman. I mean, I think I bring that out in the book too. When you look at what they do to women in abortion clinics, it's not good medicine.
They're like front alley abortions instead. You know? I mean,
exactly.
It's like the same. People really don't know what they're doing.
They took the sign off the back door and put it on the front door. But yeah.
Now you knew Norma McCorvey. Also known obviously as Jane Roe in your story. Now there was a lot of discussion about her in the later time, what she believed and what she didn't believe.
Right.
What was your take?
Well, first of all, Norma was a personal friend of mine. Not just I knew her, personal friend. She stayed at my home in New York. I stayed in her home in Dallas. She actually took me and bought me my first cowboy hat and boots. And took me shopping, yes. And I used to send her bagels from New York because she loved them. That was kind of our friendship, you know. She called me Woman of the East, you know, who she would call for advice. And so Norma, you know, she was 100% pro-life. She fought with Sandra Cano, the Doe of Doe v. Bolton, to overturn Roe through the Justice Foundation. They brought their case to the Supreme Court, but they didn't grant them certiorari to hear the case. And so it was her desire, her entire life, to want to see the overturning of this sad decision. And in fact, I know some people alluded to the last few years of her life, like, oh no, she flipped back. Doug, I spoke to Norma less than an hour before she passed away. She called me. Her daughter had placed the call, and she wanted to speak to me. And she made me promise, Janet, I'm not going to be here to see this through. Please, please, can you continue with all the work you do, with the groups you do, and bring an end to abortion and overturn Roe v. Wade? I need to know you're going to keep at it. And I said, Norma, I promise you, I will not stop until we see the overturning of Roe and we make abortion illegal and unthinkable. And so on June the 24th at 10:10 a.m., when we had that Dobbs decision, Doug, I just looked up to the heavens. I had tears in my eyes, and I said, Norma, promises kept. That was my sentiment, promises kept. Because, you know, it hurt her so much over the years, knowing that by her flippantly, over a pizza lunch, signing that paperwork, you know, that this happened.
Which was all a lie.
It was all a lie, because first of all, she was already several months pregnant when she signed that paperwork. So they knew darn well she wasn't going to get an abortion. The other thing, too, is you tell me, when does the plaintiff never spend one day in court? She never spent a day in court. The lawyer never contacted her throughout those years, that, you know, the couple of years that it took the case to get to the Supreme Court, and as we know, it was heard twice. Norma McCorvey found out about Roe v. Wade the day on January 22nd, that morning, when she opened the front door of her home, picked up the Dallas newspaper, and saw the headline.
Really?
That's how she found out. Now, you would think the lawyer, you won, would be calling her client to tell them. No.
Was that Sarah Weddington?
Yeah, Sarah Weddington and Coffey, the two of them. No, they didn't call Norma. She found out by picking up the paper, and she brought it in. The friend was sitting there having coffee with her, and she threw the paper down, and she said, look at this. Abortion's now legal in America. And guess what? And the friend went, what? And I'm the Jane Roe of Roe. And the person went, and I'm the Queen of England. Ha, ha, ha. They didn't believe her, you know? And of course, she spent a number of years in the abortion industry. But she got to a point where she wasn't doing very well working, counseling the women, because she was started to say to them things like, now, do you really sure you want to have an abortion? Do you know what that is? So she wasn't selling abortion. She wasn't selling it. And so eventually, as you know,
she got off the talking points.
Yeah, and she left the abortion industry with the help of actually Operation Rescue and Flip Benham, and because they were right next door, and they were reaching out to her, and so she became pro-life, and then eventually came into the Catholic Church. One of the things in the later years, when she suffered from COPD and she had trouble breathing, she stayed home more. She made rosary beads. I bet you people didn't know that. That was like a little pastime for her, and she took great joy out of doing that, making the rosary beads.
Well, you know, you've got testimonies in here, young people, you talk about the impact, the wider impact as relates to the family and men, etc. But one of the things you also have is answering some of the tough questions in the back. But one of the things in Children Made to Order on page 151, seeing children as a burden and a punishment, that seems to be a generational thing going on with a lot of young people who either don't want to be restricted by having children or feel like the world is it's such bad shape, especially with ecology, that I can't bring a child into this world.
Right. Well, there is a certain sentiment out there that I see. You know, when you talk to young people getting married, you know, I even have a couple of friends of mine who said to me, you know, my son's getting married, and him and his fiance have said they're not going to have children. And they're shocked, you know, parents our age are shocked by that. Like, how did this happen? Why wouldn't you not want to have children? And some of it is selfish motives. Some of it is this Me Too attitude, what I want, what I need to do for me. And so, you know, that's why I think we've got to get back to the basics. We've got to get back more to church, because most of these couples that have that Me Too attitude and I don't want children are also not practicing their faith. It's a direct connection. So I think we have to challenge people to get back to God.
Right, and become more other focused.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Well, you have in here dialogue with the other side. Shouldn't rape victims have the right to have an abortion? Or I agree, late-term abortions is worse, and it's much worse, as you were describing your friend, but it's very rare.
Right. Well, late-term abortion, first of all, is happening. We have proof of it. There are certain states, New Mexico is one of them, where they're doing late-term abortions, Maryland too, Colorado. And we know by the testimonies of the people who suffer from those late-term abortions that it is happening.
Right.
Yeah.
So just before we go, what's the reaction to the book so far?
It's been wonderful. A lot of people are kind of embracing the book, and I've had people read it and then they take a highlighter like you, Doug, and then they give it to like the granddaughter or grandson and say, okay, now Grandma wants you to read this. But one interesting thing is I offer, if a school or a church group orders the book for the kids and they've read it, I'm willing to do a free Zoom meeting with the kids, meet the author. Because you know what, Doug, I'm really committed to educating people on this issue. Because you know, I say at the end of the book to them, there are some abortions only you can stop, and some lives you may only be able to save. And I want to empower you with that knowledge so that you can save a life too and save a friend from going down this road.
Very good, and hopefully this book will help as well. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Doug.
Janet Marrana, author of Everything You Need to Know About Abortion for Teens, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com, all things Catholic. Thank you for joining us. An important book. Check it out. I'm Doug Keck. See you next time.